Hello, I'm Kads, and welcome back to the free-to-play review, and oh boy, have we got a lot to talk about today. We've got 3 events that just went live today, all with the theme of the Monster Hunter collaboration between Capcom and Raid, and so let's dive in to which of those are worth your while and which of them probably aren't. So at the top of my list, we do have the Lunar Festival Titan event, the return of everyone's favorite long-term project, fusion-esque type event. But yeah, we have another Titan event. It's going to go on for just under 3 weeks, and you have the opportunity to get some pretty decent rewards, topping out here with a 5-star perfect soul for the current Fragment Summon champion, Zinogre Blademaster. Now, I feel like on the surface, the Titan events do get a bad rap, but if any indication from my poll last time asking who was going for Tormund on the Tormund Titan event, it was actually a pretty substantial amount of people. I want to say like 70% at least of the people polled. Granted, it was like under 200 votes, so it's small sample size, but nonetheless, I was surprised to see that a lot of people were actually willing to go all the way to Milestone 5. So in this case, it's honestly a pretty decent deal. If you don't really care about the 5-star perfect soul, and I'm kind of in that camp where I'm not really that fussed about getting all the way out to 1500, I will try if it's within reason, but if I can't get there, then I'm not really going to be fussed about it, because honestly, Milestone 1 is pretty typical, like garbage, basic stuff, but energy and gems is pretty nice. Mortal Soul coins are always nice. Epic Skill Tome, Ancient Shards, Plarium Points, Mortal Soul Stone. Milestone 3 is where it starts to get pretty juicy, honestly. 600 for a Legendary Tome, that's really cheap compared to usual, because usually the Legendary Tome is like at 1450 or 1400 when it's a 1500 Titan event. So this is very, very generous. So less than half of the effort required, you can get yourself a Legendary Tome. 200 energy is always nice. Mortal Soul coins, some lesser oil, pretty good as well. And Milestone 4, again, same story. We have a Mythical Skill Tome here. Last time we had one of these, it was basically 1450, 1400, somewhere around there, again near the end of the Titan event. This is at 1000 where you only need 1500, and there's a maximum of 1750, forgot to mention that, so there's a buffer of 250 as well. But on the way to the Mythical Skill Tome, you also get 100 more gems, you get Greater Oil, which is always good, Void Shard, some dust for re-rolling your Ascension stats, Immortal Soul Stone, 6-star Chaos Ore, some Extract, really good stuff honestly along the way, and it's relatively obtainable because it's again lower down at 1000. And then once you start getting into Milestone 5, the Superior Oil is pretty good, underrated I might say. Soul Essence is also good, Superior Extract is good, Soul Coins are good, Primal Shard, some Chaos Powders if you want to re-roll accessories, Ascension stats, and then it kind of goes down a little bit with 5-star Chicken, 6-star Mythical Chaos Ore. I know a lot of people Endgame perhaps value these really, really high just because you might get a god tier piece of Mythical, but for me personally, I don't have a lot of Mythical gear, 6-star, and so it's like I don't really need a ton of those. But yeah, so in summary, I would say that the good things here are that the skill tomes are really obtainable. They're a lot cheaper than usual, so that's a great thing, so you don't have to put in as much effort. There's still a 250 point buffer, so you don't necessarily have to max out every event that has whatever the lunar points, I guess they're called in this go around. You don't have to max out everything that has them. You can kind of play with that little buffer and see how much you can skip depending on the event. And the bad parts are the same as always. It's going to require extra effort. It's a mini fusion, if you want to think of it that way. It lasts for 2 weeks. You got to participate in a good chunk of the events, not necessarily all of them, but a good chunk of them, just like a fusion. And in this case, there's no split souls along the way like UDK and Wukong. They offered you like split souls, so you can kind of pick and choose how far you wanted to go. If you only wanted a 3-star soul, you could stop there. But in this case, it's all or nothing, where if you don't get all the way out to the maximum, you don't get any blessing for the fusion champion. But I don't think you really need a 5-star for her personally, but if you do want to get out there, then hey, you banked it, and maybe she'll come in useful in some Cursed City Awakened stage or something in the future. So what's my plan and what are my recommendations? As I kind of mentioned earlier, that if you really just want to go for the skill tomes, legendary and or mythical, that's a definitely easier goal to shoot for. Just shoot for 600, which is a cakewalk in comparison, or shoot for 1000 and you can walk away with pretty decent rewards. If you want to go get a bit further, like I'm going to do, I want to at least get to 1350 because I do want the Chaos Powder, just because I personally don't run Phantom Shogun's Grove at the moment. I've never done a stage. I just haven't gotten to the point where that's really where I want to focus my extra energy. I'm still grinding masteries for the most part, but at least 1350, and then if it's easy enough to get all the way out to 1500, why not kind of deal. If it's something really difficult, like a bunch of artifact enhancement or some Heroes Path event that's ridiculously crazy, which we might mention a bit later, foreshadowing. If there's something crazy like that, then I will probably just stop at the 1350, and that's going to be good enough for me. As with the previous iterations of the Titan event, I would expect at least one bonus summoning event that's midweek or something, or is a corollary to some other champion chase, summon rush type deal, where you're going to have to invest some shards if you do want to get into the higher echelons of the milestones. The next thing to discuss is the Specialist 2 summon pool. In this case, I believe it is decreased speed champions. And you guys know how these work. You have a chance to get some epics and or legendaries from the specific pool of champions. In this case, we're dealing with a legendary rate of 5% and an epic rate of 95%, which is about 5/6 of a sacred shard. So you can basically think of these as sacred shards, non 2x, as far as the rates are concerned. And honestly, I think there's a good assortment of champions here. Oella, I think, is underrated. Obviously, the Nergigante, whatever archer is busted for Hydra, so she's good. Theodore has decreased speed on the A1, but primarily he's an AoE poisoner and activator a little bit. Snectrack, I think, is underrated as well, but really good, solid protection champion who also has decreased speed. A couple of epics are good. I think Neldor, is that his name? Yeah, Neldor is a beast in Fire Knight Hard. Maruka is really good for the Sand Devil, if you watch that guide that I put out. Siege Hulk, underrated nuker, at least for faction wars, but he can hit relatively hard. Stag Knight, one of the best debuffers in the game. Fenax, one of the solutions to the Wukong problem. If he just uses A1, can block revive there. So Ruella, another good mention there. So a good assortment of champions. There's also a Void epic. No Void legendary this go around, unfortunately, but there is a Void epic. So they're mixing and matching some of the Voids into the pool sometimes. Unfortunately, it looks like this is going to be one of the ones that is not free-to-play friendly, because at least the only source I can see that's starting in the next few days is probably going to be the Sand Devil Turn Attack Tournament, which starts tomorrow, at least at the time of this recording. And I don't know about you guys, but I typically don't participate in those at all. So once they put fragments there, it's basically a done deal, and I don't really get to participate in that particular summon pool. I don't know if there's going to be some other event. It is 25 fragments per summon, which is relatively cheap, and I could definitely see a lot of people who are wailing out to try and get the exclusive Hydra Beast here, the Archer Champion. So I can anticipate that being the case, but if you're low spender, free to play, and you're not really interested in buying crystals, then you're either going to have to do a lot of Sand Devil over the next few days on top of everything else that's going on in the game we're going to talk about as well, or you're just going to have to pass, which is kind of where I'm at. So that's my plan for this one, is just to skip it. I don't get the chance to get the Archer, not a big deal. I didn't really expect to get her from this. Any type of exclusive thing is just kind of unreasonable to expect to get on a free-to-play account. So at least for me, I just kind of move on and put them out of my mind and focus on whatever else I can get my hands on. And lastly, we have probably the most controversial event of the Trifecta, and that is, of course, the Monster Path. Now, this was teased as part of the Monster Hunter collaboration that you were going to have a chance to get Alatreon Blade Master from this path. And in this case, the only ways to get points are behind my head. You can see upgrading champions, so champion training, and then summoning souls from soul stones, so a soul stone rush. And unfortunately for a lot of people, there are no shards, or there's no summon rush aspect to this, and I think a lot of people were expecting that, and it is most certainly not the case. So it's champion training and soulstone summoning. Now, to expound on that a little bit, I can empathize with folks who are preparing for this to be some sort of massive shard event, and they had their sacreds ready or their voids ready or whatever they're going to pull. But I will say that the silver lining here is that champion training, while a lot of people do find it tedious, it is honestly the most accessible thing, especially as free to play, but even to the whales and krakens, it's more painful for them to do perhaps, but I think you could think of this, we'll talk about the totals in a bit, but I think they can frame this as just like a champion training tournament where you have to grind and grind and grind to get the top of your group to get a Krisk or an Elva or whatever they've offered in the past, but except that it's not a tournament and it's just an event, and all you have to do is do enough to get enough points to get whoever the champion is, in this case Alatreon Blade Master. So I think it's akin to a champion training tournament worth of effort relative to a whale or a kraken. Or obviously they can just wail out on the soul stones, and that could be the way they get there. Either way, I don't think it's as bad as people are making it seem, even for the heavy spenders, because it's just like a champion training tournament where you just win by doing enough points. You don't have to beat anyone, you don't have to be first in the group. So I don't think it is bad as people seem, but it's definitely a lot less accessible for the free-to-play low spenders. So a bit of a spoiler as far as where I plan to go, but we'll talk about that later as well. But you can take a quick look through here. We got got some energy, some gems, some chaos ore, some oils, some books, 2 legendary tomes here. We have the champion here on the left and a 5-star perfect soul on the right. Again, unlike Blazar in his path, there's only the perfect soul, so it's an all or nothing thing again. And we'll talk about how potentially unreasonable it is to go all the way out there. But yeah, so you have some lunar points as well. So that's kind of mandatory. There's 280 in this, so you can't, by skipping this entire event, you guarantee that you can't get the Zinogre Blade Master Perfect Soul, so you have to get some amount from this, and we'll talk about the path to get there as well. So the way I looked at this is that I identified 5 different paths you could possibly take, and the first of which will be the single legendary tome route. So you can kind of see I'm making my way there, and I want to point out that basically, in order to do this path, because there's a 2 key here node, there's a 1 key here, 2 key there, essentially any path you take that involves getting all the way down to the bottom of whatever path it is involves you having to come down the center through the left or the right in order to open either both of these middle paths or to open one of the left or the right path. And then of course, if you're doing the math here, you're wondering how on earth can you do all of that. There's also a 3 key node down here if you wanted to get if you wanted to do both sides of whatever. So legendary tome, starting from the top, you pick the left or the right, you come down to the center, you have to grab these 2 keys here, and then you can come down because this is already going to be open. You come straight down to the legendary tome, and that will cost you 38,000 points over the course of 4 days, which is honestly fairly reasonable when it comes to, or comparing it to, a champion training event as far as acquiring a legendary tome. Now, if you've already done that, then it will be relatively cheap comparatively to also get the second legendary tome, in which you'd only have to come down from this path where you already are and just get these nodes to this one, and that will cost you an extra 25,000 points for a grand total of 63,000 points, which is definitely on the steeper side. But if you were to have, if you're lucky enough to have some soul stones to kind of offset that a little bit, that could be achievable for you. If you were solely focused on just getting the lunar points for the Titan event, then again, you still have to pick left or right, come down to the center, open up the keys, open up both of these, come down to each of these 9,000 nodes for the lunar points, and then you have to come back up to whichever side you started on. So in the case, this side for me, you have to come down to the 3,500 here, and then you'd also have to work your way down the other side and through whichever way to get to the other 3,500 node, and that it would cost a total of 53,750 points, which again is fairly steep. It is cheaper than the double legendary tome route, but it is still fairly expensive, and you're kind of missing out on some of the extra goodies that are a part of this path. The next path is of course the ultimate reward here of the champion here, legendary champion Alatrius Blade Master, who is exclusive to the Monster Hunter collaboration. That is essentially identical, although I'd recommend going down the left side in this case because you already need to go down the left side to get to him. But you come down here again, you start in the middle, you always have to get these 2 keys, and that allows you to open this. So you come down the left hand side through the Void Shard and all the way down 70,000 points for the champion himself, and all of that is a grand total of 107,750 points, which is of course ridiculously steep. So that via champion training is probably unattainable. I would say for just low spender free to play, you can kind of wipe that from your mind unless you're going absolutely ham over the next 4 days, and that would just be ridiculously tiring or tiresome, and I wouldn't recommend doing that. But if you really wanted to try and do it that way, you could muscle your way through it. But the most controversial part, at least the way I see it, is coming down to the perfect soul, because in my mind there's no reason for you to go just for the perfect soul if you don't have the champion, especially because it's exclusive, and banking the soul now does nothing if you don't get the champion now or during the events before they end in March or whatever. So for me, I added them together, so we're starting off after we get the legendary champion, which is already 100 and something thousand points. And then once you've done that, unfortunately, in order to get 2 more keys, you still have to come down from the center and pick up or get through one of the legendary tomes to get the 3 key node. And then you have to come all the way back up, start here on the right side, work your way down, open this, come through the primal shard, come through the mythical tome, and then 50,000 more points to get the 5-star perfect soul, which will land you a grand total of 223,060 750 points, which is ridiculous beyond belief, and that is literally only accessible to people who are yeeting a ton of soul stones. So if they really want to bank a 5-star soul for the champion on top of already getting him, then Whales and Krakens, have fun with that one. But as a free-to-play player, don't even think about it. Don't even consider that. That's way too many points to crank out in 4 days. So really quickly, let's take a look at this in spreadsheet form. You guys know I love my spreadsheets, and we have each of those paths added up together or added up separately in each of these columns, so you can kind of see the math behind it. The 2 legendary tomes, the Titan path, the champion path, and then the soul path, which is piggybacking off of the champion path. And the main thing to highlight on the left side of this where you can get points, it would be the champion training section here. And we have 2 rows of numbers here that detail how many points you'd get for each level of chicken, as well as each level of, or leveling up chickens and adding them together into a 6-star champion in the end. So per capita just means the points that you would get for making each tier of the chicken or the champion in case of a 6-star. And the cumulative just means it's accounting for the fact that you need to feed chickens into chickens to make higher level chickens in order to make a 6-star champion in the end. So for example, if we're taking a look at probably the most accessible path to the majority of players, and you wanted to get to 38,000 points over the course of 4 days, then you'd basically have to make 1.5 6-star champions, which if you're a regular participant in champion training events like the one that just ended a few days ago, getting to 14 or just under 15,000 points for a legendary tome, it'd be slightly easier to do this over the course of 4 days than it will have been to do that over the course of 5 days. And as a bonus, I did make sure to include what my plan is for this particular hero's path, and I will say it is probably a little ambitious to say I'm going to get to 48,000 points, or just 50,000, let's round up, and that's because that's essentially 2 6-star champions from scratch, plus or minus some chickens here and there. But my plan is to definitely go for at least the first legendary tome, and then after that start picking up as many of the Titan points as I can, but not all of them. Let me show you guys in the actual game here. So I definitely plan to come down the center here. You can already see I've made my way there, working on this to get the keys. I'm going to grab this legendary tome here on the left because I care a little bit more about the dust versus the powder for the re-rolling of ascension stats. But after that, I'm just gonna bank the 100 that I'm gonna get on the one side, and then I will try to get both of the 40 nodes out here near the start. And if I can't do that, I'm fine skipping it. Again, I'm not too fussed about getting all the way out to 1500 in this particular instance. And if I can stop at 1350, then I'll be happy in the Titan event. So that was most certainly a lot of information. I typically like to spread these out, but since they all began at the same time, I figured I might as well combine them instead of making 3 separate videos. So with all this craziness going on in mind, let me know down in the comment section down below which of these events you are going to actively participate, how far you plan to go in the Titan event, if you plan to do anything for the summon pool, and what your plan is for the monster path. That's going to do it for this free-to-play review of all of the Monster Hunter event craziness going on right now. And as usual, if you found this video helpful, then be sure to hit that like button down below. And if you enjoyed the video, then be sure to hit that subscribe button down below for more content just like this one in the future. Thanks for watching, and have a good one.